Good morning, surviving colleagues. This is not a presentation, it's a request for help from a practitioner to science. For the 30th time now, states and other stakeholders have met to tackle climate change, COP30 in Belém, and is opened the usual ceremony, a glass half empty, half full, news comments on this line. It worked, it didn't work, etc. But the truth is that some things are happening in the real world, but not enough. And this is due to a misperception, which I invite economists to clear out as soon as possible, because it's really the blocking factor. The misperception which is guiding all the discussions about climate change is that there is a fundamental trade-off between environment and economy. That is, that whatever you do for the environment comes at a cost for development and vice versa. Now, in general, economy has already cleared out that this is not true, but it needs to be a little bit more precise, because there is still a harsh fight pending, but it's not the one that is focused. Houston, we have a problem. The first one is that people expect the COPs to solve the problem, which they obviously can't. COPs are made to coordinate states. What states can do, they can set monitoring systems, ideal targets, but they cannot change the real world. This is up to society and economy. All but states can impose to the real world to do the right thing. You economists know well that this is an absolute illusion. In the year 301, Roman Emperor Diocletian found himself tackling the first well-documented case of hyperinflation. And he decided to tackle it the way of the emperor, with a decree, top down. He just signed a decree that said that prices from now on will not grow anymore. And what he obtained, that on the official market, prices indeed stopped growing, but all the goods transferred to the black market, where the prices grew even quicker because of the decree. And it's the same that could happen with a COP that suddenly decides imperative measures, etc. You know, all the incentives, all the carbon taxes, they are only distortions if they are not understood by society and economy as something useful. So something is happening, but not enough. And this not enough is really dramatic. We're very close to tipping points, which can really mark the end of our civilization. And this trade-off I talked to you about is still governing the discussions. Sometimes it takes tones that are absolutely surreal. And I'll give you an example. COP28 in the United Arab Emirates. The president of the COP declared that leaving fossil fuels behind would imply going back to the Stone Age. It is understandable from the point of view of someone who represents a people who not so long ago lived harsh lives based on very difficult dry land agriculture and suddenly found themselves with the means to develop very quickly. But it also came from a person representing an area that the Max Planck Institute foresees to be inhabitable in 20 years' time. So we all see the contradiction. This contradiction has to be cleared out because it's really the stumbling block of every decision, and you economists have a huge role to play into that. The problem is that there is this misperception which is blocking, but in itself is a misperception. There is the false perception that of a trade-off between environment and economy. It's not the real problem. The real problem is that environment is not incompatible with development, but it is totally incompatible with unfair development. And this is what is, the fact that this is not understood is what's really blocking everything. I will just give you some hints, hoping that some of you, maybe, or some of your students could start developing a quantifiable approach to solving this problem. You know, whenever you fight for the environment, be it climate or biodiversity, actually you're fighting for a value that we do not visualize, which is balance. We don't care too much about balance, simply because it's, in principle, it's a superabundant condition. Just as we don't want to pay anything for air, although it's essential for survival, we don't give a value to balance because we are flooded with balance in principle. But what we are doing with all our attacks to the environment is destroying the balance of our system. Climate change itself is described in terms of temperatures, but it's actually a huge imbalance in the energy situation of our planet. Climate change is the over-intake of an insane quantity of energy in a system that once used to receive a certain quantity of energy from the cosmos and then send it back to the cosmos. Now, due to the greenhouse effect, where this system is currently intaking the equivalent of the explosion of 412,000 atom bombs a day. And this transforms not really in heat, or it transforms in a randomization of the system. It just destroys the balance of the system, so the system does not display anymore foreseeable cycles, which are essential for organizing human society and economy. If you don't know when it rains, you don't know when to sow. And this is what's happening. The fact that you don't know when it's going to be hot or cold is much worse than the fact that there could be a flood. So we need to defend this balance globally, but this global balance is the compound result of a series of local and sectorial sub-balances and of their reciprocal relationships in balance. How can we try to put under control such a system? Normally, it's not the only solution, but the international community has chosen to take an instrument from mathematics, which is a matrix. A matrix in which the different cases are related to each other, and the quantitative analysis of the reciprocal relationships and state of the different boxes should give us the possibility to control balance. Sometimes I ask to my students out of the blue suddenly to tell me what's the first thing that comes in their mind if I say French Revolution. There are various replies, but there is one which is never missing, which is beheadings, guillotine. Well, few history books tell that 4 years before the French Revolution, there was a volcanic eruption in Iceland in the Lucky system, which filled the sky with ashes, which blocked sunlight on France, which determined 4 years of extreme cold, which killed agricultural productivity, so that when the French guys arrived at La Bastille with a knife in their teeth, it was not really because they were motivated by Voltaire, but they were motivated by hunger. We live in a system in which guillotines are connected with volcanoes. We need to put it under control. We can use a matrix at different levels of complexity, but there is one very, very, very basic, which has been selected by the international community. It happened through the Rio summits process, which is the one that you can see on the slide, that puts in dynamic relationship for macro sectors, which are also values. Environment, development, human rights, and peace. How does it work? Let us imagine an environmental event like a drought. From the human point of view, very often it transforms also into an economic event because there is a failed harvest. It concerns development. And normally the chain of consequences would stop there if this happens in a place where there are safety nets. If the farmers ensure their harvest, or if the state intervenes to defend them in moments of difficulty, it stops there. But if this happens in a place where there are no safety nets, the chain of consequences continue, where an economic event determined by an environmental event easily transforms in an event that concerns human rights. For instance, when a failed harvest makes the difference between sending or not sending your children to school. But then take an individual or a family, submit them to uncertainty about their subsistence and compression of their basic rights, and you have the recipes of conflicts and so-called migrations. What does it mean? It means that something destructive which is injected in one sector of our compound balance normally reverberates through the whole system as destructive. Vice versa, something constructive reverberates into the whole system as constructive. And I don't have time to describe how this gives us very powerful tools using the Keynesian idea of a multiplier, except that we extend the idea to sectors which cannot be measured with money. But let me just say, imagine that I put 2 solar panels on a poor school of a poor village. In terms of CO2 emission saving, I will obtain an infamous, irrelevant advantage, but in terms of giving children better opportunities to study and become aware of what's happening around them, I'm helping the environment hugely. Now, describing the situation as such probably does not surprise you. But if it sounds reasonable, I believe, but if you take one step back at reality, you will realize that we've organized society, economy, and all the rest according to the opposite principle. Not that there is a synergy and a coherent cascade of effects, but that there is a trade-off. We've always thought that if you want to obtain something in one of those macro sectors, which are also values, it will be to the detriment of the other sectors. And in this decision, we also decided that there is one sector which is more valuable than the others. We called it with a noble word, development, but we actually had in mind wealth, which is different. In the name of wealth, we decided that human rights could be neglected. Otherwise, why send 12-year-old boys 14 hours in a mine? And this happened in Great Britain, not in some horribly savage tribe, at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. And I'm quoting this example because not so long ago it was quoted in many macroeconomy books. In the name of development, of course, we sacrifice peace. Every conflict has an economic motivation. And there is this fundamental idea that there is a trade-off between environment and development. If you want to develop, of course, you have to destroy the environment. Otherwise, how do you take the resources? But if you look in terms of balance at our system, the truth is exactly the opposite. It means that if we protect the environment, we're not giving up anything. We are entering into a quicker development, a stronger development. This is the truth, and this has been, in general terms, acquired by economy. It has also been acquired by the real economy and the real finance. We have witnessed a great increase in ESG investments in the big portfolios, and it was not motivated with the will to save the world. It was motivated by all the reasonings that showed that a sustainable, socially and environmentally sustainable investment presents less non-commercial risks, introduces a much better industrial relationship atmosphere, and all these advantages that I'm not going to list to you. But although economy already cleared out the fact that this trade-off perception is totally false, in the real world, not in the COPs, in the real world, this perception is still breaking all the progresses. Well, thank you if you continue crying out that there is no trade-off between environment and development. On the contrary, they are reciprocally amplifying, but still we need to identify what is the problem. The problem is that environmental protection, a sound environment, is not incompatible with development. It can foster development, but it is totally incompatible with unfair development. This is what created the problem. And this mainly for 2 reasons. One can be found in the origins of our thought. We decided that development or wealth was more important than the other sectors based on a very simple reasoning. It is true, if you want to build wealth, on the way, you will create damages. But then if you become rich, you have all the means to take care of this collateral damages. And this is both liberal thought. Adam Smith knew very well that the invisible hand was going to create damages, but then justified it because you created wealth, and through this wealth, you could take care of the leftovers. And this position is also sustained by the enemy sister of liberalism. We consider these doctrines as enemies, but they are twin sisters, which is Marxism. When Marx said that economy is the structure and all the rest is superstructure, is exactly the same conclusion. First, we have to build wealth, and even if we create damages on the way, then as rich people, we can take care of them. But then history proved that this idea is totally wrong. The collateral damages on the way created all the conditions that brought us to our close to tipping point situation. Well, it's not true, but it is true that an unfair development is really creating the problem. The first problem that it creates is that if you have a system in which the only objective is to create wealth, or to put it in very basic economic terms, the rational agent is the one who always and only looks to maximize his profit, you create a situation in which scale economies start to play. It means that those who start first will benefit from scale economies, and so they will have to run endlessly to an increasing in size. Otherwise, they could be wiped out from the market. It means that they cannot afford any social or environmental precaution. It would increase their production costs, in principle. This creates a cluster of very rich and very powerful producer, distributors, finance people that lives out the rest of the world somehow in poverty. But poverty also acts against the environment, because if you are in a situation of emergency, you cannot afford to take care of the future. Whatever it's beside you, you will use to survive today. Go and tell to a campesino who fled the Brazilian Nordeste because of drought and found as an only solution to burn down an acre of the Amazonian forest that he's not green. And you can imagine his reply. But then there is another reason why unfair development is not compatible with the system. Mother Earth was fair in distributing resources. They were different, but somehow equally distributed. Take energy. Those who don't have the sun normally have the wind. Those who don't have the cows have the camels. Yes, there are some environments which are less generous than other environments, but basically Mother Nature distributed resources in a fair way. If we build an economy in which, for scale reason, we need to concentrate, polarize all the time, then you get those areas that used to express a wonderful biodiversity, but are now only soybeans, only avocados, only textile manufacturing, this kind of things. This is totally contrary to the natural functioning of the system. The only solution that could unblock the cops is to have those who benefit from this clustering and polarization understand that if they go on in the same direction, it will destroy them also. It's exactly what we had to explain to the president of COP28. We understand that you want to defend oil, but if you do it, you're making your own country inhabitable. It's the same thing that needs. And do what? I don't say eliminate scale economies. They were very useful to take us out from millennia of scarcity, but apply them where they make sense and are useful, or build a system based on a quality, scale economies rather than quantity, scale economies. It means going back to the richness of a product that can be sold at a higher price, because it does not only deliver the declared function of the product, but it also delivers an experience. It delivers aesthetics. I mean, normally the farmer who produces for the great distribution is enslaved by the obligation to produce a huge quantity with no quality at a very low price. And that, is there any dignity in this way of being a farmer? Or isn't it better to produce something that you can sell more expensive, because it's not only calories, it's also the experience. It's also a visit in your country. Do you know of any value chains around a no GM cornfield? But I know of extensive value chains around some places where they produce that very special wine that costs what it costs every bottle, things like that. We need to convince the economy that is convenient for everyone, including those who are hyper billionaires, because they control these clusters made out of scale economies, that this is suicide for them too. If we manage to explain this thing, we don't have to fear anything in defending. Even GDPs will grow faster. But we need to defeat unfair economy. And not only because we are generous guys and we think so much about those who are suffering, but simply because if we don't, it's the end for everyone. As I told you, this is not a presentation. It's asking for help to economists. In my day-to-day as a negotiator, as a climate negotiator, a biodiversity negotiator, I feel this at every step. It's not only the bad owners of multinationals, it's also society that backs them. If you have a great plant in your city, despite it might affect your health, your quality of life, you defend it as providing jobs, So in this sense, the bad economy is unwillingly sustained by society. We need to clear all these misunderstandings. Otherwise, there is no way that we can save ourselves from what's looming. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Oh, forest of hands. Questions?
Yes, thank you very much. Good morning, Grammenos, and really thank you very much for joining us. It's an honor to have the Senior Deputy Secretary General of the UFM, who has over 25 years of dedication and work in different negotiation spaces, water, biodiversity, climate, was the coordinator of environment within the Italian Development Corporation, and has really worked also in the academic context to also promote these ideas. So
I'm very good at baking pizzas.
And very, very good. And I think we'll take you up on that offer. And so really an honor to have you deliver this keynote speech. I think maybe these are perhaps some personal reflections after having also spent quite a few years in the COP context. I think we go down the wrong road when we define climate change as an environmental issue. Not just from the perspective of developing countries, but I think broadly speaking, climate change is a profoundly developmental issue. And at the risk of sounding anthropocentric, I think the planet can do well without us, but I think it's humanity that's really the first victim of climate change. So in that, thinking about how you bring society, markets, countries on board, I think the more clear we are in framing the climate crisis and climate solutions as an opportunity for development, for the economy, and for humanity, I think the better we are to make progress. COPs are profoundly political spaces, and we also assume that they are linear. We saw in Belém that they are definitely not. We had a couple of years ago language around fossil fuels that precisely, some would say thanks to the UAE presidency, were able to get in. But then we saw backtracking, and obviously the, having a major player being out of the room also gives a lot of courage for actors to, backtrack on a lot of previous commitments. So I think my first message is not to assume that COP processes are linear in terms of progress, and we can lose quite a lot of momentum that had been achieved in the past. To a room of economists and multidisciplinary thinkers who are working at the national and regional level, my question to you is, seeing where we are at the COP, and I share your sense that the COP can't deliver on anything, it's a coordination mechanism, and I'm personally not very optimistic for the next 3 years at least. How do you connect thought leadership at the national and the regional level, particularly with your experience at the UFM? Where do you see the role of regional coordination spaces as complementing the lack of momentum that we are seeing at the COP space? Thanks very much.
Regional versus global. Well, first of all, this is political, it has global implications, but we need to remember that sustainability has its own natural space. And the natural space, it's called a concrete territory. It's a place where a certain civilization was expressed by a certain environment. And if you want to call me a determinist, you're right. Yes, I am a determinist. I think that the environment shapes societies. And this normally doesn't have a fixed measure. You can have a huge concrete space like the Midwest in the United States, which is homogeneous. It's the Corn Belt, it's the Wheat Belt, or if you go in a territory like the ones that we have around the Mediterranean, normally it's extremely small. You have concrete territories which represent a certain sort of wine, or which represent a certain village with all things like that. So, global, regional, yes, it's essential. We need to coordinate, but it's not exactly the measure that catches the real work that we have to do. The real work that we have to do is local, and it joins what I said. I mean, we have to foster local development according to the potentials of every ecosystem. It's the only way in which we do not harm Mother Earth. But still, the regional level is smaller, so it allows you to be more concrete. And thank you for offering me the opportunity to boast about the fantastic achievements of UFM. But we do really have something. In climate negotiation, the Mediterranean does not exist. It's fractioned in 3 different negotiating groups: the Arab group, the European Union, and the other ones who belong to, we don't know too much what. These groups often are on opposite sides on many issues, take loss and damage. But if you look at it from another perspective, we are all sharing the same destiny. The Mediterranean is a concrete territory. I don't have the time to explain you how the specific climate conditions of the Mediterranean made it possible that the most important revolution in history, the agricultural revolution, happened systemically here, which defined us as a place of great civilization and gave us and things like that. All this now is being destroyed. So although we perceive ourselves very often as enemies, different and things like that, think about it. What is Europe? Europe is a totally artificial idea. I mean, if we define, according to the criteria through which we define the other continents, we shouldn't exist. Our name should be West Asia. We exist as a continent with its own physiognomic, environmental, cultural identity, because we are the product of a certain very special climate, which was given to us by the Mediterranean. The same thing happens with the southern shore of the Mediterranean. It's Africa, but it's not Africa. It's part of our bubble. We think we're different, but if you take one step back, we're just the same people. Ramadan and Carême, Eid al-Fitr and Easter is the same thing, which is The ways old ladies dressed, both in Christian and in Muslim, they dress the same way. The value is the same. And we look alike. Semites and Indo-Europeans, they look alike and they're different from. So can we recognize that, okay, we sit on opposite benches concerning loss and damages, but we have something in common that we need to defend. And what we did is we had all the states realize that, okay, I mean, of course, you can have your fights about loss and damage, but there are some things that we need to defend together. And we came to this conclusion, which goes in the direction of what I told you, which is based first on the fact that the Mediterranean region is a real hotspot. It's very dangerous what's happening here. It's going to be a geostrategic bomb very soon. And it's so dangerous not only because climate impacts, forecasted climate impacts are very severe, but also because it is an asymmetric region. It's a place of rich and poor people. The same impacts on a region which is uniform in income distribution are not so dangerous. In a place like ours, where you have demographic trends which are opposite between the north and the south, there are rich people and there are poor people, it's really explosive. So what do we do? Well, we recognize one thing. Even though there are the rich ones, nobody around the Mediterranean, not even the richest, have enough resources to face a crisis of this space and magnitude. But if we put together all our differences, even those that made us have disputes in the past, we end up having a basket of solutions which is much larger. Take energy. Europe wants to decarbonize by 2050, quantitatively impossible without relying on the solar potential of the South. But in turn, the solar potential of the South cannot develop based only on internal markets. There wouldn't be enough finance. So I need you, you need me. Take food security. Climatic bands are migrating north very quickly. If you're familiar with the wine and vine sector, you know it. I mean, we're talking about producing champagne in Denmark, which is the... But anyway, it's going north very fast, and it's not only that. Well, we are witnessing a spontaneous increase in cooperation in agriculture and forestry. Governments did not intervene. Why? Because the so-called phytogenetic heritage of the south of the Mediterranean, the plants, crops, and things that are commercially viable, will be the ones that will save Southern Europe economies in not so many years. So I need you, you need me. It's not only I need your argan oil where I used to plant my olive oil, but I also need you to teach me how to take care of that. Because we think that in the north we have absolute knowledge. No, I'll give you one last and final example. There is a chapter in climate negotiation which stands, and it's called technology transfer. It's somehow related to loss and damage. And it stands because, let us be sincere, technology transfer is perceived as the generous gift of the beautiful, advanced, and whatever to those who are not. But what is technology? Technology is not only the latest computer. Technology is know-how on how to use the territory. If you go along the Silk Road, and here I talk to a Persian lady, you will often find some buildings which are cone-shaped, and they're called yakchal. Yakchal is a Persian word that means the fridge. They were used by merchants to deposit perishable goods, and they have one characteristic. No matter how hot it is outside, inside the temperature is always between 0 and -4. Electricity expenditure, 0. The Arabs and the Persians exported to Europe a technology called the Keynote that allowed to have gardens flourish in the desert. Please understand me. I'm not here to say that we have to go back to the beautiful era in which there were no antibiotics and no science. On the contrary. But imagine science applied to this huge knowledge. And then there is no more technology transfer. I need you, you need me. And in the Mediterranean, we started talking about knowledge sharing. Yes, at the COP, it's technology transfer. But among us in the Mediterranean, it's knowledge sharing. And what is the end result of it? Is that it creates the basic condition to respect the environment. Because if you imagine an economy, an economic basin in which we start sharing energy systems, we start sharing food systems, we start sharing manufacturing. It implies a place where people start to circulate a lot, much more than the quantities that we fear so much of so-called migration. But it's a positive movement. It builds peace and it rebalances income distribution. So if we do the right thing to tackle climate, actually we're doing also the right thing to tackle the root causes of climate change, which is lack of justice. This is the experiment that we are running at the regional level. And I must say, I'm very proud to say that it's going very well. It does not surface too much. And Chatham House rules, I also tell you why doesn't surface too much. We explain it at the COPs or in this Congress, but we don't cry too much about it because it implies having some people who in principle shouldn't be working together, work together. If you have
Thanks for the interruption. We're streaming on YouTube.
Okay, that's all right. Thank you.
That's where the Chatham rules apply.
No, but it's okay. I mean, I'm not saying
Everybody knows
anything. I'm not saying anything bad. I mean, if you have two peoples, and I'll leave it to you to imagine who they might be, work together, and it surfaces in the media, there will be the political obligation to state, no, this is impossible because they are the horrible enemy. But if you keep it under the media threshold, then it's fine. I mean, we understand it's necessary. And I'm not obliged to take those principled positions that would block everything. This is why you don't hear so much about this project. But this project is advancing hugely to the point that the European Union, for instance, has uptaken all our construction concerning the integration of energy system and has transformed it also in one of its largest programs called the TMED, which will be financed very consistently. I think I've taken too much of your time.
Okay, thank you. I need to give the word to Rim because she was looking at me very sternly for the past 15 minutes. Rim, can you keep it short, please? Pretty please.
Yes, I will be. Thank you, Grammenos. Very inspiring. You made a very important comment on the trade-off, environment and economy. And also you made a comment on moving from quantity-based production to quality-based production. The first thinking I might tell you is the price will go up. And then this will only create further problems for the poor countries and the poor people who will not even have food to afford. So having 9 billion on the planet, how can you deal with all the necessities, particularly the priorities, especially for low and middle income countries? And then at the same time, if we look at those countries, not only there is the climate change induced destruction, but also you have the man-made destruction. So my question to you is, what are the solutions that you may propose to bridge these trade-offs at a global level, dealing with the situation we have today?
Thank you, Rim. You are the economist. I am a practitioner, so I will reply to you. I cannot reply to you with comprehensive data. I can reply to you with my own experience. I come from development cooperation. Starting with food, you know, we are so scared of the moment in which we will be 9.5 billion people, but we currently produce enough calories to feed 12 billion people, except that they are distributed so as to have distributed and produced so as to have 2 billion people who are sick out of eating too much or badly. And this has a huge cost. Only obesity is considered to weigh on public health systems the equivalent of the GDP of my country. Then add diabetes, heart diseases, and things like that. OCDE considers only obesity as the cause of the equivalent of the lack of 68 million people in labor market every year. This produces another pole, which are the desperate ones, because on one hand, we have 2 billion people who are sick out of eating too much or eating badly. On the other hand, we have 1 billion people who are in food insecurity. The two things are related. One produces the other, but also this other pole costs the economy an incredible amount of money, unless you want to say that being obliged to finance Frontex or secret services or armies is good for the economy because it fuels the demand side and things like that, which can also be considered. On the other hand, I've witnessed experiences like take slow food. Slow food has a spin-off which is called 10,000 Gardens in Africa. What do they do? Well, no, let me take another angle of this, which is clear. Between the two Americas, wisely it has been decided that there should be a biodiversity corridor because these very rich ecosystems were fragmented by roads and things like that. But there is also the coastal side of the American biodiversity corridor, which is more difficult to manage. The fragmenting factor is not infrastructure, but is industrial fishing. Industrial fishing just disrupts all the connections between all the different ecosystems, which are reciprocally reliable. So they decided to tackle it with a methodology called a slow fish. What does it mean? It means I go community by community and ask them, what were your grandparents doing? What did they fish? To discover that the grandparents were respecting seasons of reproductions and were extracting richness of diversity from the objective diversity. So, okay, let's go back. How did they use that crab, the traditional recipe? Based on that recipe, then they developed the value chain. This very specific dish that no one knew about. And I'm talking about food because it's simple, but we can talk about manufacturing, we can talk about services and things like that in the same perspective. It entered the hotels, it enriched the touristic experience and things like that. And the result is that fishermen who were enslaved by the power of the centralized buyer, generally big fishing ships that would immediately freeze everything, that would tell you, no, I don't care what you have. You need to fish tilapia. And if you want to survive, you need to fish it irrespective of the reproduction periods. What did they get out of that? Mere survival and being enslaved to a price which was set by the centralized buyer. What did this operation do? It freed them from this slavery and greatly increased their income because they were not selling, again, calories anymore. They were selling the experience of grandmas, which can be sold a lot more expensive, so quantity diminishes. Again, you are the economist. Who am I to tell you, to explain to you that a green economy is actually a booster of growth because it redistributes employment.
Okay, can we?
Yes.
Sorry for jumping in. Can we leave it at that? So, Rim, the answer to your question is this is your homework. Thank you. Can we give thanks to Grammenos again, please?